Hey drummers community, one of the questions we get asked all the time is what are the best drumsticks? So Carlos, what do you have to say?
Hey Tyler, thanks for the great question. What are the best sticks? So before I go into that, a little bit about me. My name is Carlos Plaza. I am an online drum instructor, and Tyler at the Drummers Community and I have come together to offer 2 free lessons on my part to anybody who comes to me from the Drummers Community. So if you are signed up with the Drummers Community, or if you are one of the people on the Facebook page, reach out to me and you will get a full hour of free lessons. More information about me at my website, CarlosPlazaDrums.com. So let's talk about the best drumsticks. Before we get into talking about drumsticks, I want you, whoever you are watching this, to put yourself in one of these 4 categories. Either you're watching this video because you want to know what the best drumstick is because you're asking for a friend, maybe your brother, sister, cousin, uncle, father, son is going to be learning drums and you want to buy them drumsticks, or you are a beginner drummer, you've never played drums before, or maybe you are about to start taking lessons, or maybe your parents bought you a drum set, but you're a beginner, and so you want to know what the best sticks are. Or you are an intermediate player or an advanced player. So I'm going to knock 2 of these things out in just a second. If you are asking for a friend or you are a beginner drummer, go get a pair of Vic Firth 5A wood tip. Vic Firth is the brand, so any 5A will do. It doesn't have to be Vic Firth. That's my personal preference. I am a Vic Firth aficionado, but any brand will do. 5A is the size, and wood tip is the tip of the stick. If you are in one of those 2 categories, you don't need to know more than that. Go buy a pair of Vic Firth 5A wood tips and start practicing. The rest of this video has nothing to do with you. If you are just starting out, or if you are buying sticks for somebody else, you don't need to worry about everything else that we're going to be talking about in the rest of this video. If you are a beginner, buy those sticks and start working on your paradiddles, okay? Don't worry about this video. It's going to confuse you. It's going to make everything more complex, which it doesn't need to be. Practice your paradiddles, watch your grip, watch your posture. Don't worry about the sticks until you fall into one of these other 2 categories, okay? So for the rest of you, intermediate and advanced, let's talk. Okay, so for the rest of you, intermediate players and advanced players, you are watching this video because you're a little bit confused on what the difference is between the different types of sticks. Maybe you just need a refresher on it. Maybe you've hated the type of stick you've been using for all along and you want to change it up and you don't really know where to begin. So this video is for you guys. The drumstick breaks down into the body of the stick and then the tip of the stick. And we're going to leave that for the end, no pun intended. So what we're dealing with when it comes to the drumstick is the length of the stick and the diameter of the stick. How thick is it? Okay, so I have here with me the thickest, longest drumstick I've ever encountered. This is a marching band stick, and maybe in the video you can't necessarily tell, but if I compare it to one of the smaller drumsticks out there, it becomes comical. Okay, so there's a huge difference in the different kinds of sticks, huge difference. But all it breaks down to is the length of the stick and how thick it is. And like I said, the tip is something different. This is a big ball tip, thing's enormous, but again, we'll talk about that at the end. So before we get into the different lengths and the different diameters, let's talk about something very important. And this is one of the reasons why I felt I had a voice for doing this video, because there are videos like this online, of course, but especially for the drummers community. You guys are awesome. And I would like to tailor my response to be very specific to a group of people that I see talking to each other on Facebook all the time. And they really just want to get down to the nitty-gritty answers. So I'm going to give you 2 analogies. The first one is, let's say you have a sledgehammer, and by some form of magic, you're able to just kind of hover it above an egg. It falls, you know, with almost no height between them, it's going to fall and it's going to smash the egg. If I take a gigantic feather, conversely, and I try to break the egg with all my might and all my strength, I'm not going to be able to break the egg, right? So the sheer weight of the sledgehammer alone is going to create an immense amount of power. Whereas the feather, it's very, very light. It doesn't matter how much power you put into it, you're not going to be able to break the egg. So the idea is, the heavier the stick, the more power you're going to be putting into what you're playing, whether you like it or not. A bigger stick, a big, gigantic, beefy, long, fat drumstick is going to hit loud and hit powerfully even if you don't want it to. I mean, and essentially, of course, you could play very, very, very gently with a gigantic stick. I'm not saying that, but I think you guys know what I mean when I say that the size of the stick is going to have an impact on the power that you're going to be able to apply to the drums. Now, on the flip side, the tiny little stick, in this case, the Vic Firth 7A, this is a lot like the Feather. You can make a lot of noise with it, but you're gonna have to put a lot more power into it. Okay, so why am I talking about this? You guys wanted to know what 5B meant, and you wanted to know about nylon tip versus wood tip. Why am I talking about this? Well, I'm talking about this because if you know the kind of drummer that you are, you're gonna be better equipped to figure out the best type of stick for you. And it does take trial and error. So the answers I'm going to give you now are going to be the beginning of the journey that I expect you to go on. So the amount of power that you naturally put into the drum, how strong are you, how big are you, how hard do you hit, that's going to play into it. And then the other part of it is what kind of music are you trying to play. So the two most extreme genres of music, I would argue, are, extreme death metal. And then on the flip side, it's, jazz, soft jazz, both of which are fantastic genres. If you're a drummer, you're gonna have fun no matter what you're doing. But for metal, it doesn't need to be insanely loud. That's a misconception about metal. But it does need to be powerful. When you are going to hit a cymbal or a drum with a big, fat, heavy stick, you're gonna pull a lot of sound, a lot of depth, and a lot of a big sound out of the drum or the cymbal. And with metal, that's what you want. You want big sounds, not loud. It's gonna be loud, but that's a misnomer. It doesn't automatically have to be loud, but it just has to be big. So a bigger stick is more appropriate. Jazz, conversely, you're going to most likely be using either a very small stick to pull out very tiny sounds. It has to be relatively quiet. It has to be gentle. That's the perfect word. It has to be very gentle. So you're going to want to use a smaller stick. We are not going to be talking about brushes today. The reason is because that's kind of a separate thing. Even though it is a type of drumstick, it really does belong in its own category. You would never go to a music store and say, hey, I need drumsticks, and they're going to sell you these. The brush is a very specific thing. We'll talk about that another time. So for now, you just have to know that the type of stick that you're using is either going to be a bigger stick or a shorter stick, and those play in to different genres. The other analogy I wanted to give you before we actually got into the specifics about the size of the stick and the tip and all of the stuff that you wanted to know is sort of a reflection on the silliness of the question, what is the best drumstick? So the analogy is if somebody asked you, what is the best tool? A hammer or a drill? You'd say, well, that's a silly question. You'd use different tools for different things. If you need to hammer in a nail, the hammer is the best tool. If you need to extract a screw from the wall, then you pop a drill in reverse and you would want to pull the screw out with that drill. So the question, what is the best drumstick, should lead you to the question, what are you going to be using that drumstick for? Which brings up those two parallels of music, which is why I brought those up first. You really have to ask yourself the kind of music that you're going to play. You have to ask yourself how much power you're going to be applying. And then you can start to get a better sense of what it is that you need to know before you go and buy the perfect pair of drumsticks for you. Okay, so now that we've gotten all that out of the way and you know that bigger sticks create louder sounds, more powerful hitters create louder sounds, and a more soft style of music is going to require a more gentle sound, which is better used with a shorter, smaller drumstick. Now that we've gotten all that out of the way, let's talk specifics. So drumsticks are made mostly out of wood: maple, hickory, oak. These are the standard ones. Really, hickory is the most standard one. They are made of wood. There are plastic sticks. There are graphite sticks. Feel free to check those out. I personally have never had the best luck with those sticks. I've always just kind of ended up going back to wood. Oak is supposedly the toughest wood stick. Supposedly it's the strongest one and it can take the best beating. I have broken oak sticks faster than I've broken hickory and faster than I've broken maple. So it's really just going to come down to which stick you like the best, the feel, the length, the diameter. And if you're practicing and playing, you're going to break sticks. So if you're not breaking any sticks, you're probably doing something wrong. Even if you're playing gentle, eventually a stick's going to break, it's going to chip. Don't worry so much about, how tough the wood is. Buy the stick that feels good for you. I will, since we're talking about what sticks are made of, I will denounce these I'll put a picture of it up here, as you can now see. There are these clear, see-through plastic sticks. They're usually pretty long. They're about as long as these massive CoreMaster marching band sticks, which are very, very large. So it's already a little bit on the longer side. And it's this very, very, very bendy plastic, which you watch me try to bend this wooden stick, and I literally cannot bend it. And these plastic sticks are very bendy. It has a little light at the bottom that lights up, and when you hit, it causes the light to go off. So I do not want any of you using those sticks for any reason whatsoever, other than, you know, maybe you're doing something fun and maybe you're gonna play one song and the lights are down and you want to make a little show of it. But in any professional situation or in any practice situation on your practice pad, don't use those sticks. So, okay. Let's start with the length of the stick, right? We said it breaks down into the length and the diameter. Let's talk about the length. The 5A wood tip that I told those two first categories to go check out, that is a 16-inch stick. That is the standard length of a drumstick, 16 inches. The CoreMaster, which we have already talked about, big, fat, long, enormous, massive drumstick, this is 17 inches long, so it's 1 inch longer than the average. The 7A, which is one of the smaller sticks, is 15.5 inches. So this is half an inch shorter than the average drumstick. So as far as the length of the stick, 16 inches is the average drumstick. The 5A that I referenced before, that I told those first two categories to go check out, that is 16 inches. That's the average standard length. The big CoreMaster, the big beefy massive drumstick we talked about before, this is the longest stick I've ever really encountered. This is 17 inches long, so this is 1 inch longer. Okay. Now, when it comes to figuring out the length of the stick, the drumstick usually has a number. So it doesn't always have a number, which causes a lot of confusion, which is why this video is being created in the first place. The CoreMaster doesn't have a number. You can't reference it directly by the name of the stick. But 5A is the average. 3A, the number's smaller, so you might think that the stick is shorter, but it's not. It's the opposite. The 3 is going to be longer. The 2 isn't necessarily longer than the 3. But the number of the stick is going to identify it for you. So if the 5 is the average and the bigger the number, the shorter the stick. 5's average, 7 is shorter, 8 is shorter. Okay. And then conversely, the 3 and the 2 are usually longer. When it comes to the name of the stick, so for instance, the 2B, if it's an A, it's going to be the average size. If it's a B, it's going to be thicker. But again, these things don't always give us all the information we need because, like I said before, the CoreMaster doesn't have a number. It's literally just called the CoreMaster, and that doesn't give us any information. We have to kind of do research thereafter. So if you see letters and numbers, that is going to give you some information, but a lot of this is going to be trial and error. The other thing is the letter, 7A, 5A, 5B. That's going to tell you the diameter of the stick. If it's A, it's more of that standard thickness. If it's B, it's going to be a little bit thicker. However, again, you guys asked, you wanted to get into the weeds on this thing. The stick that I use is the 3A. So this actually is a little bit thicker than the 5A, even though it's the 3A. So if it's thicker, wouldn't it be the B? Okay, perfect. Welcome to the confusing topic we find ourselves discussing. It's 3, so it's a little longer than the 5-inch. This is 16 inches and 3 3/16 of an inch. So this is slightly longer than your standard 5A, which is 16 inches. So as a quick recap, the drumsticks you're going to be looking at are usually going to be numbered, and they're sometimes going to have a letter. The higher the number, the shorter the drumstick is going to be. So the 7s and the 8s are shorter sticks. The 2s and the 3s are longer sticks. 5 is your average 16-inch drumstick. And then the letter is the thickness. A is your standard, and then Bs are a little bit thicker. But again, if you go to Guitar Center or wherever and you ask to see a bunch of different drumsticks, some of them aren't going to have letters and numbers. You're going to have to sort of trial and error this stuff until you figure out what you like. We're going to take it over to the ride here for a second real quick, and I want to play for you the biggest, fattest drumstick I've ever seen, the CoreMaster. This is a marching band stick versus the Vickfirth 7A. This is a shorter, thinner drumstick, and I want you to listen to the difference. Before I do that over on the ride, what did I tell you before? The thicker and longer the stick, the more power it's going to have automatically, all by itself. So if you apply the same force with a bigger, fatter stick, it's going to be louder and more intense. If you then apply that same force with a thinner, smaller stick, the sound is going to be less intense. Okay, so that doesn't help you unless you know what kind of music you play and if you know how hard you naturally hit. If you're very gentle and very suave around the kit, but you want to play in a metal band, get a thicker, bigger stick. It's going to help emphasize the power of the music that you're playing. And conversely, if you started off as a punk drummer and you hit so hard you're cracking sticks and breaking heads left and right, but you want to play a jazz show, go get yourself a smaller stick, get a thinner stick, get something that plays gently all by itself, and then you can sort of balance things out a little bit. All right, let's take it to the ride. Okay, check this out. So this is going to be a Core Master 17-inch long stick versus a Vic Firth 7A 15.5 stick. You can even see the difference in the sticks. This one's huge, this one's small. Check this out. Huge difference, you guys. Unbelievable difference. This thing makes a lot of noise, a lot of power, okay? And this does not naturally, okay? So if I hit really hard with this, I'm gonna get about as much power as I get if I hit normally with this, okay? So as you can see, different size sticks make different sounds. The bigger stick is going to make a bigger sound. The smaller stick is going to make a smaller sound. That's a really clean, simple way of thinking about it. The Core Master is going to make a big, kind of more loud, more intense, more defined sound, and the smaller stick is going to do the opposite, less defined, more muffled almost, and generally quieter. And then, like I said before, if you hit really hard with the thin stick, it's going to be about the equivalent of if you hit really soft with the big stick. So that should give you, along with the analogy I gave you of the sledgehammer, a sense of how important it is to think about how hard you're hitting and the type of music, as I said before, that you're trying to play. So let's go to tips, and I am going to go to my notes on the tips because there's a lot of information and I don't want to get it wrong. There's two different types of tips, the nylon tip and the wood tip. So these are the 5 most standard types of tips that you're going to find. These are all for wood tip. The round tip, the barrel, the acorn, the oval, and the teardrop. And you'll see these as I'm talking about them. I'm going to have them up on the screen here. So the round tip creates an articulate and crisp sound. We're going to come back to that one. The barrel tip is more of a louder, kind of fatter sound, beefier sound. The acorn tip is very full, very round. The oval tip is known for having the biggest spectrum to really pull the sound out. So if you're going to hit the high tom with an oval tip, it's going to pull the highs out. If you're going to hit a low tom, it's going to pull the lows out. The teardrop is the standard. That's the 5A. Again, I'm going to keep referencing that 5A. 5A is a teardrop tip. It's warm. It's good for low tones. There, again, like I said, there's lots of different types of tips. Those are the 5 most obvious ones. So the nylon tips are known for articulation. So you're going to see nylon tips used in jazz if you really want to pull the sound out of that ride cymbal. And now, let's go to the ride and we're going to talk about some of the different tips, and I'm actually going to kind of play them for you so you guys can hear the difference. Here is a nylon tip on my ride. Versus a 7A, which is a much smaller stick, right? And we're going to listen to the two compared to each other. Okay, huge difference. So listen to how the nylon tip pulls out such a specific sound. It's almost like the exact sound that isn't being changed in any way. Whereas with the wood tip, this is a acorn 7A, so this is a smaller stick with the acorn tip. Doesn't it feel muffled? Doesn't it sound muffled? This is for you to decide. You have to decide what you like here, but the nylon tip is gonna pull that sound straight out, whereas the acorn tip or the barrel tip is gonna have a different effect. Now, the round tip. I use a 3A. I like the round tip. It creates a lot of articulation as well. It's a bigger tip. It's gonna pull that sound out, much like the nylon. Check out the big, beefy barrel tip on the Core Master. This is the biggest stick there is, with a big, fat, round tip. Check out the comparison between this one and the small 7A. So the big, beefy tip almost has the same effect as the nylon. Let's compare those. So different sounds, different intensity, different, like if somebody's talking to you about drums and they say, oh, it's a really round sound. You're like, what the heck, what does that mean, round? This is round. This one feels round and well-rounded and beefy, and this one is thinner. Right? One of them is a thick sound and the other one's a thin sound. Okay, so the round tips create a thick, articulate sound, and the bigger the stick, the more round it's going to be. And then again, with that nylon thin stick, that little stick, it's going to be a smaller sound. It's going to be a thinner sound, but still articulate, because again, if you go back to the audio on the teardrop, the kind of standard stick, that 7A, it was almost muffled, and it was kind of like more on the subtle side. Okay, so I don't know how much more we can talk about tips. As I said, I described the different tips and the kinds of sounds that you're going to get out of them. The question is articulation. How much, how bright, how intense, how articulate would you like your ride to be or your cymbal to be? Let's do another experiment real quick as well. I'm going to hit with 3 different sticks on this HHX, and then I'm going to hit with those same 3 sticks on a B8 ride. Let's take a listen to that and see the difference based on the type of cymbal that we're talking about, which is also going to play a factor. We forgot about the thing that we're hitting is going to play a factor as well. Let's check that out. Okay, so there's one other thing I wanted to talk to you about when it comes to different drumsticks. Some companies want to go kind of to that next level of pairing the 2 sticks. Okay, so for example, I've got a brand new pair of Vic Firth 3As here, and I haven't tested it yet with these, so we're going to go ahead and give this a test. But what Vic Firth does, one of the reasons why I like them, and it says it right there on their box, pitch paired, they call it pitch pairing, I call it pitch matching, same thing, is they will make the stick, they'll go through the entire process of making the stick, and then they will put that batch together, and people will go through the process of finding the sticks that are as close to identical to each other as possible. They do this by weighing them. So even though you're going to go through the entire regular process, this is a piece of wood. This piece might be a little bit more dense than this piece on this stick. You're not going to really know that in the creation process because you're talking about grains of wood. Every single piece of wood is a little bit different than every other. So they will weigh them to get 2 pair of sticks that weigh almost identical. They break it down into 3 categories. Again, this is Vic Firth, is why I'm such a big fan of theirs. Light, medium, and heavy. And you're talking about the same stick, but sticks that are more naturally heavy than others, they're going to match those sticks. The other thing that they do is pitch matching, which is to find if that stick resonates at a similar frequency than the other stick. So what I mean by that is, when you're playing on a piano, let's say you're playing an F, that's obviously noticeably different than an E, and those are 2 different pitches. Everything in our world resonates at a particular frequency. Okay, it makes a particular pitch. and they pitch match their sticks. So I know it's going to seem crazy the way that I was taught to pitch match kind of like just in an instant is you get a very loose grip and you tap it against your head. It's going to make a sound, and that's going to tell you what the pitch is, and then you grab the other stick and they're identical. So here I am telling you proof with a pair of Vic First sticks that I just bought that they are exactly the same pitch. Another way of saying that is they are both making the same sound when I hear that. And that's why hitting it against your head, as silly as it is, actually really works, because you can hear the note that it's making because it's vibrating your skull. So, you know, it's silly, but it works. And I learned that because I saw a guy come into Guitar Center once back when I worked there, and he was rolling the sticks across the table to see if they were wobbly and bent, and he was hitting them against his head to figure out what the pitch was because he wanted identical sticks. I can't imagine going any deeper into this than that. We could go deeper, but we've talked about the lengths of the stick, we've talked about the diameter of the stick, the different types of tips, we've talked about how who you are and how you play is actually more important than anything else. And if you hit really, really, really hard and you want to play a jazz song, maybe you should use smaller sticks. And if you play kind of gently and very subtly and very softly, and you want to, you know, play a rock song or a metal song, you might be better off using a longer, thicker, heavier stick. It's going to kind of balance things out a little bit. So, like I said, that's about as deep as we should go. Now, for the drummers community, please remember that Tyler and I have partnered together to bring these videos to you guys. I am an online drum instructor. The first lesson is free, but for the drummers community, the first 2 lessons are free. So a full hour is going to be free to you. If you have any more questions about drumsticks or anything else, you know, technique, rudiments, different songs, how to read, please feel free to reach out to me. I am offering that special deal for drummers community specifically. I want you guys to know that I'm a part of your community, and Tyler and I have really collaborated here to try to make things even better, more resources, more information, and then of course lessons if you are interested. So please feel free to reach out. So again, thank you to Tyler, everybody in the drummers community, and I hope to hear from you guys. Thank you so much.